The gas station sat alone on the desert highway, its flickering neon sign barely visible in the late afternoon sun. Harold Mercer stood by the pump, his 73-year-old hands trembling slightly as he filled his old Chevrolet. His weathered face told stories of decades lived, though most who saw him now only noticed the frailty, the slight stoop in his shoulders, the way he moved carefully as if afraid his bones might break. He wore faded jeans and a plain grey shirt that hung loose on his thinning frame. The rumble came first, distant but growing. 5 motorcycles appeared on the horizon, their engines roaring like thunder across the empty landscape. They pulled into the station with aggressive revving, circling Harold's car like predators surrounding prey. The bikers wore leather vests adorned with patches, their faces hard and mean. The leader, a massive man with a scarred face and arms covered in crude tattoos, swung off his bike with deliberate menace. His name was Tank, and he carried himself like someone who had never been told no. The others dismounted, spreading out in a semicircle. They were younger, hungry-looking men, eager to prove themselves through intimidation. Harold continued pumping gas, pretending not to notice them, though his heart rate increased. He had hoped to avoid trouble, to simply get fuel and continue his journey in peace. But peace was not what these men were offering. Tank approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped just inches from Harold, close enough that the old man could smell whiskey and cigarettes. The other bikers laughed, anticipating entertainment. They had done this before, found amusement in frightening the vulnerable. Harold finished pumping and carefully returned the nozzle to its holder. Tank blocked Harold's path to the payment terminal, his massive frame casting a shadow over the elderly man. The other bikers moved closer, forming a tighter circle. One of them, a wiry man with a snake tattooed on his neck, kicked Harold's car tire casually, testing boundaries. Another spat on the ground near Harold's feet. The old man remained calm, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged predators. His pale blue eyes, though surrounded by wrinkles, held a steadiness that might have warned more observant men. But these bikers saw only an easy target, a way to kill time and feel powerful. Tank smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. He reached out and flicked Harold's collar, a gesture of casual dominance. The others chuckled, emboldened by their leader's actions. One of them mimicked Harold's careful movements, exaggerating the old man's cautious gait. They were enjoying themselves, feeling invincible in their numbers and youth. Harold attempted to step around Tank, moving toward the station's convenience store to pay. But Tank shifted, blocking him again. The game was clear now. They would make him dance, make him beg, make him understand his place in their world order. The old man stopped, standing perfectly still. His breathing remained even, controlled. He did not plead or protest. He simply waited, as if he had all the time in the world. This unexpected composure irritated Tank. He preferred fear, preferred the satisfaction of watching people crumble. He stepped closer, invading Harold's personal space more aggressively. The other bikers sensed their leader's frustration and increased their own provocations. One knocked the gas cap from Harold's hand, another leaned against his car possessively. The snake-tattooed man pulled out a knife, using it to clean his fingernails, while making sure Harold saw the blade. The situation escalated slowly, each biker taking turns, demonstrating their dominance. Tank grabbed Harold's shoulder, spinning him around to face the group. The old man stumbled slightly, but regained his balance without complaint. His silence seemed to anger them more than resistance would have. They wanted a reaction, wanted to see the fear they believed they deserved to inspire. One biker poured water from his bottle onto Harold's car hood, laughing as it dripped down. Another keyed a small scratch into the paint, watching Harold's face for a response. Still, the old man remained quiet, his expression unreadable. His hands, though aged and marked with liver spots, hung steady at his sides. Tank pushed Harold backward against the car. The old man absorbed the shove without falling, though the impact was clearly hard. The bikers hooted their approval, feeding off their leader's aggression. They were pack animals now, individual conscience subsumed by group mentality. The gas station attendant watched from behind bulletproof glass, his hand hovering near the phone, but not calling. He had seen this before. People like him did not get involved in biker business, not if they wanted their station to survive the week. Harold understood this. He was alone in this situation, as he had been alone in many situations throughout his long life. But he was not defenseless. He was simply choosing his moment. Tank grabbed Harold's shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist. He pulled the old man close, breathing whiskey fumes into his face. The message was clear without words. They could do whatever they wanted, and there was nothing Harold could do to stop them. The old man met Tank's eyes directly, still showing no fear. This eye contact, this refusal to look away, was a small rebellion. Tank raised his fist, preparing to strike. The other bikers leaned forward, anticipating violence. This was the moment they lived for, the moment when they crossed from intimidation into actual harm. Harold could see it in their eyes, the hunger for blood, for screams, for the power that comes from hurting someone who cannot fight back. But before Tank's fist could fall, Harold moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with deliberate purpose. He reached into his pocket slowly, keeping his movements visible and non-threatening. Tank hesitated, confused by this action. Was the old man reaching for a wallet? Was he going to offer money to make them leave? The bikers watched curiously as Harold withdrew an old flip phone, its case scratched and worn. It was the kind of phone people used before smartphones, basic and outdated. Tank laughed, a harsh sound. Several bikers joined in, mocking the old man's ancient technology. What did he think he was going to do? Call the police? By the time any law enforcement arrived, they would be long gone. Harold did not dial emergency services. Instead, he opened the phone and scrolled through his contacts with arthritic fingers. He stopped on a name, highlighting it. Then he turned the phone screen toward Tank, letting him see the name displayed there. The name was simple, just 2 words, but those 2 words changed everything. Tank's expression shifted from amusement to confusion, then to recognition, and finally to something that looked very much like fear. His face went pale beneath his tan. His bravado crumbled like sand. The other bikers noticed their leader's reaction and stopped laughing. Something was wrong. Something had changed. Tank took a step backward, releasing Harold's shirt. His eyes remained fixed on the phone screen, unable to look away. The name on Harold's phone was Ghost. Just that single word, but it carried weight that pressed down on Tank like a physical force. His hands began to tremble slightly, mimicking the old man's age-related tremor, but born from entirely different causes. The other bikers sensed the shift in energy. The wiry man with the snake tattoo stepped forward, trying to see what had affected their leader so profoundly. Tank waved him back sharply, his voice cracking slightly when he spoke. "Step off. All of you, step back." Confusion rippled through the group. They had been seconds away from violence, and now their leader was retreating. The man who had keyed Harold's car protested, his voice full of frustrated aggression. Tank turned on him with sudden fury, grabbing his vest and slamming him against a motorcycle. "I said step the fuck back!" The violence in Tank's voice was no longer directed at Harold, but at his own men. They obeyed, moving away from the old man, but clearly unhappy and confused. Tank turned back to Harold, and for the first time there was something like respect in his eyes, or perhaps fear masquerading as respect. Harold had not yet pressed the call button. He simply held the phone, the name Ghost still visible on the screen. The threat was implicit. One press, One call, and whatever Tank feared would arrive. The desert highway suddenly felt less empty, as if invisible presences were watching from every shadow. Tank wet his lips nervously. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its menace. "Look, old man, we didn't know. We were just having some fun. No harm meant." Harold remained silent, letting Tank's words hang in the air. The biker leader's apology sounded hollow, motivated by fear rather than genuine remorse. Tank glanced at his crew, then back at Harold. His mind was clearly racing, calculating risks and consequences. The other bikers watched this interaction with growing unease. They did not understand what was happening, but they recognized fear when they saw it, especially in someone they had never seen scared before. Tank took another step backward, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "We'll pay for any damage. To your car. Whatever you need." Harold's thumb moved closer to the call button, not pressing it yet, but the threat was clear. Tank flinched at the movement. Sweat appeared on his forehead despite the cooling evening air. He turned to his crew with desperate authority. "Clean his car. Now. Get water. Clean that scratch. Whatever. Move." The bikers scrambled to obey, though confusion was written across their faces. They pulled rags from their saddlebags, found cleaning supplies in the gas station store, and began frantically wiping down Harold's Chevrolet. The snake-tattooed man tried to buff out the key scratch he had made, working with sudden, intense focus. The transformation was remarkable. Minutes ago, they had been predators. Now they were servants, competing to undo their provocations. Harold watched impassively as they worked, his phone still in his hand. He had not said a single word since the confrontation began. His silence was more powerful than any threat he could have spoken. Tank supervised the cleaning with nervous energy, occasionally glancing at Harold to gauge his satisfaction. When the car looked better than it had before the bikers arrived, Tank approached cautiously. "Sir, we've cleaned your vehicle. Is there anything else we can do?" Harold finally lowered the phone slightly, though he did not put it away. He looked at each biker in turn, his pale eyes assessing them. Then he spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly strong for someone his age. "You boys know who Ghost is?" Harold's question hung in the desert air like smoke. Tank nodded slowly, reluctantly. The other bikers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads. They had heard stories, whispered legends in biker bars late at night when the beer flowed freely and old-timers told tales. Ghost was a name from the past, a figure who had supposedly run the most feared motorcycle club in the Southwest during the 70s and 80s. Some said he was dead. Others claimed he had gone to prison forever. A few believed he had simply disappeared, tired of the life. But everyone agreed on one thing. If Ghost was real, he was not someone you crossed. Ever. Harold continued, his voice carrying the weight of history. "Ghost was my president, back when I rode. Back when this desert belonged to men who understood respect." Tank's face confirmed Harold's words. This frail old man standing before them was not just some random civilian. He was connected to a brotherhood that transcended time and retirement. In the biker world, some debts never expire, some loyalties never fade. Harold had been a member of Ghost's Club, which meant he was protected by code even decades after hanging up his own leathers. The revelation transformed the dynamic completely. The bikers no longer saw a vulnerable old man, but a veteran, someone who had ridden the same roads they rode now, who had lived by the same rules. The fact that he could still call Ghost meant he had been important, trusted, valued. Tank's aggression had been replaced by something approaching reverence. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the mistake. "We meant no disrespect to a brother." Harold's expression softened slightly, the first crack in his stoic facade. "You boys are young. You think the leather and the bikes make you hard, but you don't understand the code yet." Harold finally put his phone away, the immediate threat dissolving. But the lesson was not over. He looked at each biker carefully, as if memorizing their faces. Let me tell you something. Real brotherhood isn't about scaring old men at gas stations. It's not about proving how tough you are to people who can't fight back. That's not power. That's cowardice dressed in leather. Tank lowered his eyes, unable to meet Harold's gaze. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, the truth of his words cutting through their bravado. They had built their identities on intimidation, on being feared. But standing before this elderly man, they felt small and foolish. Harold continued, his voice taking on the quality of a storyteller, or perhaps a preacher. When I rode with Ghost, we had enemies, real enemies. Rival clubs who wanted our territory, dealers who wanted to move drugs through our towns, people who thought they could disrespect the patch. We fought when we had to, hard. But we never ever picked on civilians. We never threatened people who couldn't defend themselves. That was the line. Cross it and you weren't a brother anymore. The desert wind picked up, carrying dust across the parking lot. The setting sun painted everything in shades of orange and purple. In this light, Harold looked different, less frail. The bikers could almost see the younger man he had once been, strong and dangerous, riding beside legends. Tank found his voice again, though it lacked his earlier aggression. How do we make this right? Harold smiled slightly, the expression transforming his weathered face. You already did. You cleaned my car. You showed respect when you realized your mistake. That's accountability. But you need to remember this feeling. Remember what it feels like to realize you were wrong, that you almost hurt someone under protection. One of the younger bikers, a kid who could not have been more than 25, spoke up hesitantly. Is Ghost really still alive? Harold's smile widened. He pulled out his phone again, and this time he did press the call button. The bikers tensed, watching as Harold held the phone to his ear. It rang 3 times. Then a voice answered, deep and rough, filtered through the phone's small speaker. Harry? That you? Harold's entire demeanor changed when he heard that voice. Warmth flooded his features, decades of friendship contained in that simple greeting. Yeah, Ghost, it's me. Sorry to bother you, but I had a situation at a gas station off Route 66. Some boys wearing patches I don't recognize. They were causing trouble, but we've worked it out. There was a pause on the other end. Then Ghost spoke again, his voice carrying authority that transcended the phone's limitations. Put them on speaker, Harry. Harold complied, holding the phone out so all the bikers could hear. Ghost's voice filled the desert air, commanding immediate attention. Which club you boys ride with? Tank answered, his voice barely above a whisper. He named their motorcycle club, a relatively new organization trying to establish territory in the southwest. Ghost was silent for a moment, processing this information. Then he spoke, each word deliberate and heavy. I know your president. Rode with him back in the day. He was a good man, tried to teach his boys right. Seems like some of you didn't learn. You know who you just fucked with? The bikers looked at Harold with new eyes. Tank answered, one of your brothers, sir. Ghost's laugh was harsh. Harry wasn't just a brother. He was my sergeant-at-arms, the man who stood beside me through wars you children can't imagine. The title, Sergeant-at-Arms, carried immense weight in motorcycle club culture. This was not just a member, but the president's enforcer, the man responsible for discipline and protection. Harold had been Ghost's right hand, his most trusted soldier. The bikers stared at Harold with a mixture of awe and horror, realizing how badly they had misjudged the situation. Ghost continued speaking, his voice colder now. I'm retired. Harry's retired. We did our time, shed our blood, buried our brothers. We earned our peace. And you boys just tried to take that from one of the finest men I ever rode with. You understand how that sits with me? Tank's voice shook when he answered. We understand, sir. We've apologized. We cleaned his car. We're trying to make it right. There was a long pause. Then Ghost's tone changed slightly, becoming almost educational. "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to finish whatever Harry needs at that gas station. You're going to escort him to wherever he's going, make sure he gets there safe. And then you're going to go home and think real hard about what it means to wear that patch. Because if I hear about you boys doing this shit again, to Harry or to anyone else, I'm coming out of retirement. And you don't want that." The bikers nodded vigorously, though Ghost could not see them. Tank spoke for the group. "Yes, sir. We understand." Ghost addressed Harold directly now, his voice warming again. "Harry, you need anything else, you call me. You hear? Don't matter what time, don't matter what it is. These boys give you any more trouble, even a dirty look, you call me right back." Harold smiled genuinely now. "I know, Ghost. Thanks, brother. Hope I didn't interrupt anything important." Ghost chuckled, the sound containing decades of shared history. "Nothing more important than making sure my sergeant gets home safe. You take care, Harry. And boys," he continued, addressing the bikers again, "you remember this day. Remember what real respect looks like." The call ended, leaving silence in its wake. The desert suddenly seemed larger, emptier. The bikers stood motionless, processing what had just occurred. They had come to this gas station looking for easy entertainment, expecting to frighten an old man. Instead, they had encountered living history, a connection to the legendary figures they had only heard about in stories. Harold pocketed his phone and looked at Tank. "I need to pay for my gas and get some coffee. After that, I'm heading to Flagstaff. You boys are welcome to ride with me part of the way if you want, but you don't have to. Ghost's word is enough. I trust you'll remember this lesson." Tank nodded quickly. "We'll ride with you, sir. It would be an honor." The other bikers murmured agreement, their earlier aggression completely evaporated. They had been given an opportunity to turn their mistake into something resembling redemption. Harold walked into the gas station to pay, moving with the same careful gait he had before. But now, the bikers saw that gait differently, not as weakness or fragility, but as the inevitable result of years lived hard and survived. The scars hidden beneath his loose clothing, the damaged joints from old fights and crashes, the weight of memories carried in that aging frame. The station attendant watched nervously as Harold approached the counter. He had witnessed the entire interaction through his window, though he could not hear what was said. He processed Harold's payment quickly, eager to avoid any involvement. Harold emerged from the station carrying a large coffee. The bikers had organized themselves into a formation, preparing to escort him. Tank approached respectfully, keeping appropriate distance. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, how long did you ride with Ghost?" Harold took a sip of coffee, considering the question. 23 years, from 1971 until 94. Longest 23 years of my life, and the best. We built something real, something that mattered. Then I got hurt bad in a crash, and Ghost told me it was time to hang it up. Probably saved my life. The bikers listened intently, hungry for stories from the golden age they had missed. Tank asked another question, his tone genuinely curious now. "What was it like, riding back then?" Harold's eyes grew distant, seeing roads and faces long gone. Different world. No helmets, no rules, just freedom and brotherhood. We policed our own, took care of our own. If you wore the patch, you were family, and family meant something. It meant you'd ride 500 miles in the middle of the night if a brother called. It meant you'd take a bullet before you'd let harm come to someone under protection. It meant the code was everything. He paused, looking at each young face. But it also meant accountability. If you fucked up, you answered for it. And if you crossed the line, broke the code, you were out. No second chances. The patch was earned with blood and loyalty, and it could be taken away just as fast. The bikers absorbed this, recognizing the implicit criticism of their earlier actions. They had worn their patches carelessly, assuming the leather gave them rights without responsibilities. Tank spoke quietly. "We've been doing it wrong." Harold nodded. "Most young clubs do. That's not your fault entirely." Harold finished his coffee and walked to his Chevrolet. The bikers had mounted their motorcycles, engines idling softly. Tank positioned himself at the front, with two bikers on each side and behind Harold's car. They would escort him properly, the way brothers escort brothers. Harold started his engine and pulled out of the gas station. The motorcycles fell into formation around him, no longer predators, but protectors. They rode together into the dying light, an unlikely convoy united by a phone call and a lesson learned. As they traveled the desert highway, Harold thought about the call he had made. Ghost was indeed still alive, living quietly in Arizona, his legendary status intact, but his active days long past. They spoke occasionally, old warriors comparing aches and pains, remembering fallen brothers, laughing about the wild years. The phone call had been real, the threat genuine, but Harold wondered if he would have actually needed it. Perhaps the name alone would have been enough. Perhaps these young bikers were not as lost as they seemed, just misguided, needing someone to show them the proper path. After 50 miles, the bikers peeled off one by one, each rider nodding respectfully to Harold as they departed. Tank was last, pulling alongside Harold's window at a stoplight. "Thank you, sir, for the lesson, for not making that call until you gave us a chance to do right." Harold smiled at him through the open window. "You boys have potential. Remember what respect really means. Honor the patch you wear. And maybe someday you'll be the old men teaching the young ones." Tank nodded seriously, then accelerated away, his motorcycle roaring into the night. Harold continued alone, the desert vast around him, his coffee cold, but his heart warm. He had not needed to fight, had not needed violence, just the name of an old friend and the truth of who he used to be. It was enough. In his rearview mirror, the gas station disappeared. Tomorrow would bring new roads, new destinations. But tonight, he had reminded himself and 5 young bikers what brotherhood truly meant. Not intimidation, not violence against the weak, but loyalty, respect, and the code that separated mere riders from true brothers. The old man smiled and drove into the darkness, his phone silent in his pocket, Ghost's number ready if ever needed again, a connection to a past that never truly dies.